Alright, we're going to simplify some rational exponents. The directions say to simplify each expression. So these are called rational exponents or radicals. If you put them in radical form, by the way, if it said put it in radical form, that's the radical form. It's the square root. 1/2 power is the same as a square root. Okay, so what is the square root of 125? The square root of 125 is, we take 125 and we break it up. This is how I like to do it. Break up 125 into its product of primes. So that's 5 times 5 is 25, and 25 times 5 is 125. So there's yeah, I'm just realizing I wrote this problem wrong. They actually had it to the 1/3 power.
Okay.
Because if this was to the 1/3 power, the answer would be 5, because
Right.
there's 3 5s that you're being multiplied together. But let's do this anyway, because this is a good problem too. What's 125 to the 1/2 power? Well, what I'll do now is take 2 of those 5s, because 1/2, so there's 2 factors that are the same, which is 5. So the square root of 25 is 5. And so one of those 5s will come out of this radical sign, and the other one will stay in the radical sign. So if the problem asked 125 to the 1/2 power, that equals 5 times radical 5. That's the radical form of that. Or if they wanted in rational exponent form, it would be equal to 5 times 5 to the 1/2 power. Like that. It's the same thing. Let's try this one. 32 to the 1/5 power. Well, now I'm taking 32 and I'm breaking it up into its product of primes, and there happen to be 5 2's that you multiply together to make 32. Another way you could write that is 2 to the 5th power. In fact, it's easier to see why this works. 2 to the 5th power to the 1/5 power. If you remember the property of exponents, you multiply the powers together. And what's 5 times 1/5? 1. So your answer is just 2. How I like to think about it is I write it out and I look for that right there. Oh, let me change to red. That there tells me that I need 5 of the same factor for it to break jail. And there they are. There's 5 2's there. So 1 2 comes out and nothing stays in. So 32 to the 1/5 power is equal to 2. Let's try this one. 7 to the 1/2 times 7 to the 1/2. Well, you remember the property of exponents that says that if you have something raised to 1 power, x raised to the m power times, a raised to the m times b raised to the n power. Not b raised to the n. A raised to the n power. If you have the same base, then you can do what with the two? With the two exponents. Remember what you do? If you had, let me write it like this. If you had x squared times x to the 3rd, how many total x's do you have?
5.
You have 5, so you're adding the 2 and the 3 together. Always go back to a simple example if you don't remember something.
Yeah.
So what can I do with these two since I've got the same base?
Add them.
I can add them together. So 1/2 plus 1/2 is
1.
1. That's one way you could do it. So it's 7 to the 1st power. That's the answer. Another way you could do this is, you'll notice that since these are both 1/2, so I'm going to write a different formula now. If you have a to the m times b to the m, notice that if the bases are different, if the exponent is the same, you could write a times b to the m like that.
Okay.
And so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to write 7 times 7 to the 1/2 power. And that also I can see. Notice I have 2 of those in there. What's the square root of 7 times 7? What's the square root of 49? It's just 7. So either way you could have done it. I wanted to show you both ways.
Okay.
Go on to another few examples. So I'll do these quicker. 3 to the 1/2, 75 to the 1/2. What I can do, like I just showed you, is multiply 3 and 75 together, put them both inside, and raise them both to the 1/2 power. Now what a lot of people do is they multiply 3 and 75 together and get a bigger number. I always tell people simplify before you complicate. So instead of doing that, I'm breaking 75 up into, what's 75? It's 25 times 3, right? So it's 3 times 5 times 5. Because 25 times 3. So now I can see, oh look, I've got 2 3s in here, and I've got 2 5s in here. So what comes out? A 3 comes out, because I'm raising it to the 1/2 power.
Yeah.
So I need 2 in order to break jail. A 3 comes out and a 5 comes out, and I multiply them together, so 15 is your answer.
Pretty simple. Yeah.
Very simple. This problem right here, even simpler, because you'll notice that I've got 3. Now even with a negative, if it's an odd fractional power, then you can deal with negatives. If it's even, you can't, but if it's odd, you can deal with negatives inside the radical or the fractional exponent. So it's going to be negative 5 to the negative 3. Whoops, let me do it like this. Raised to the 1/3 power. And what happens with these?
Just cancel, right?
Yep, 3 times 1/3 is 1, so your answer is just negative 5. Or again, you could have simplified it in a couple different ways. You could have simplified it. All right, let's do this last one. Again, simplify before you complicate. So I'm going to, instead of multiplying 18 and 98 together, it would be a huge number. I'm going to break it up. I'm going to break up 18 into 9 times 2, which 9 is 3 times 3 times 3, so there's 18. That's the product of primes. 98 is 1 less than 100. I'm sorry, 2 less than 100. So half of 100, I'm thinking about breaking it up. I know 98 is 2 times something. What's 2 times 49? Because 2 times 50 would give you 100, so 2 times 49 gives you 98. That's how I think about it. So it's 7 times 7. 2 times 7 times 7. That was your 38. Now, same deal. We can look for doubles. What do I have? I've got 2 3s here, so a 3 comes out. I've got 2 2s here, so a 2 comes out, because 2 times 2 is 4. Square root of 4 is 2. And 2 7s here, so a 7 comes out, because again, I'm taking the square root of everything, the half power of everything. Now I do what with these things?
Just multiply.
Multiply them all together. 6 times 7 is 42. A lot easier to do that, you don't need your calculator, than if you tried to multiply the 18 and the 98. Because then you're getting some huge number, and you're going to have to use your calculator to break it down. Whereas it's already partially broken down here, so just keep breaking it down more. There's your 18 right there, and there's your 98 right there. Now you can see that number for what it is, because that number is just a product of primes.
Yeah.
Number's always a product of primes. That's how you should deal with simplifying radicals, and that's also how you should deal with fractions. Multiplying and dividing and simplifying fractions. Don't multiply them together before you first break them down and cancel out what you can or deal with it in that way. That's how you do those problems.
Sweet.